Hey everybody, welcome back to Submarine History. As we wrap up the series on the HL Hunley, the world's first successful combat submarine is built by the Friends of the Hunley. Today we'll be talking about the search and discovery of the Hunley. Um, so it's kind of up in the air whether or not I'll do a fourth briefing on the subject, which would be concerned with the recovery and preservation of the Hunley. That is a very well covered subject on the internet already. Unlike the search and eventual discovery on the Hunley, that's much less talked about. Um, However, if you would like to hear more about the Hunley, in particular the recovery and preservation process, from my point of view, let me know in the comments below, and I'll think about that. I will put at least one link in the description to this briefing that will give you a place to start regarding reading about the recovery and preservation of the Hunley. And as always, feel free to stop the briefing at any time if you want to study a slide. So let's go. Okay, our references for today. All right, so previously on submarine history. On February 17th, 1864, the HL Hunley attacks and sinks the USS Housatonic while it's on blockade duty 4 miles southeast of Charleston Harbor. Housatonic sinks, stern first, and settles on the bottom. 5 crewmen perish in the explosion, and the rest scramble into the rigging to await rescue. Hunley is never found and presumed lost with all hands. And these are figures from the HL Hunley Recovery Operations Report. I actually used these in the previous briefing, but here, just bringing it back, just kind of refresh your memory. So here we have Charleston Harbor, we have Breach Inlet, and we have 4 nautical miles, southeast of Breach Inlet, which is where the Housatonic was sunk, and the Hunley was presumed to be nearby, or it was one of the theories. And spoiler alert, I mean, we know this today, but the Hunley did end up sinking 900 feet east of the Housatonic. The U.S. Navy did attempt to salvage the USS Housatonic in 1864. It was believed at that time that the Hunley could possibly be under the Housatonic, and the U.S. Navy was pretty eager to recover the Hunley if possible in order to study it and further the Union submersible effort. And eventually, U.S. Navy diver William Churchill leads an effort to salvage Housatonic and locate the Hunley in May of 1864. But poor weather prevents the complete salvage of Housatonic, and despite dragging an area of 500 yards around the wreck, the Hunley is not found. Now, in November of 1970, Edward Lee Spence, who was an underwater archaeologist, writer, and editor on topics related to diving and shipwrecks, he conducted his own search for the HL Hunley. While conducting his search, he finds what he describes as a cylindrical object which formed an unnatural shelf or ledge in the sand with raised marks of hand-hammered rivets. Spence requests permission from the GSA in 1974 to salvage the Hunley, but the request is denied due to historic preservation laws. In 1981, Spence goes to federal court to claim Hunley. However, no government agency or independent archaeologist authenticates the find. The conclusion is that Spence found a sunken navigation buoy constructed of iron with raised rivets that once might have marked the wreck of the Housatonic. And this is what they were talking about. Riveting, traditionally, it's raised. On the Hunley, they used countersunk flush rivets, which was considered innovative for that period of time. But archaeologists and naval historiographers, they knew that this is how Hunley was constructed, so that's why they were able to refute Spence's claim on the Hunley. So author Clive Cussler founded the National Underwater Marine Agency in 1978 for the purpose of locating America's historic shipwrecks. NUMA it's a private, nonprofit organization in the United States. Originally, it was a fictional U.S. government organization in Cussler's novels. Uh, but NUMA is dedicated to preserving our maritime heritage through the discovery, archaeological survey, and conservation of shipwreck artifacts. I never read Clive Cussler when I was growing up. Um, the guys I like to read were W.E.B. Griffin and Robert Ludlum. I think I would have really enjoyed Clive Cussler. And actually, doing this work on HL Hunley is it's definitely I'm definitely probably going to go out and get Race the Titanic just to see what that's about. So in 1980, NUMA initiated a comprehensive search for Hunley in the waters off Charleston, South Carolina. Now, mind you, this is going on around the same time that Spence is trying to secure his claim to the Hunley wreck site. And this is not discussed in the briefing, but there's this whole other side issue of litigation between Spence and his people and Cussler and Numa over, who had the rights to the Hunley wreck site. So, anyways, operating on the assumption that the Hunley made it back to shore, Numa developed one search area in shallow waters just offshore of Breach Inlet. The second search area was established on the assumption that Hunley suffered damage during the attack on 17 February 1864 and was located in the vicinity of the wreck of Housatonic. NUMA deployed a marine magnetometer in conjunction with a LORAN positioning system from a rubber Zodiac boat. That's how you know you're dated, when you know what LORAN is. A magnetometer is an instrument used to measure magnetic field strength. On land, magnetometers can be used to find iron ore deposits, while under the sea, they detect variations in the total magnetic field of the underlying sea floor. So 4 anomalies were detected during the investigation of both those survey areas. One near-shore anomaly was disregarded as producing too small a return, and 3 other anomalies in the offshore search area were determined to be objects from the Housatonic. NUMA researchers returned to Charleston in June of 1981 to continue the search for the Hunley. The new survey was conducted in conjunction with the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology, the SCIAA. The search area was expanded to encompass a rectangular 3-mile by 5-mile long box. This new area extended from Breach Inlet to an area immediately southeast of the wreck of Housatonic. A total of 19 magnetic anomalies were documented during the search, with 7 exhibiting the magnetic intensity expected for the Hunley. So these were the areas where the search was expanded. And red is what they did in 1980, those 2 small rectangular boxes. Purple is what they intended to search in 1981, where the green area is what they actually ended up searching. And that was probably like time and budget constraints. NUMA and the SCIAA returned to Charleston in 1994. The primary focus of this survey was to further investigate the 7 anomalies located during the 1981 survey. Side-scanning sonar and GPS was used in conjunction with the magnetometer to relocate and investigate the 7 anomalies discovered in 1981 that could possibly be the Hunley. One of the 7 anomalies is partially excavated and determined to be the remains of a wooden vessel. So they end up stopping that search in 1994. In the spring of 1995, Clive Cussler employs marine archaeologists Ralph Willibanks, Wes Hall, and Harry Pecorelli III to continue the search for the Hunley. So I don't know if it was the issue that they had run out of money, or SCIAA, they lost interest, or maybe they had other commitments. But by 1995, Cussler, it's back down to a small group of guys to try to find this boat. So the team experiences an initial setback as they expand the search area. And basically what had happened, I think they had looked at what they had searched in the previous years. They made some decisions on where else to look. The first thing they find is something not related to Hunley, and they actually get kind of discouraged, and they say, "Hey, let's just go back to the drawing board," and they kind of like start over doing some basic investigation on anomalies they had previously discovered. As a result, so they did decide to investigate anomalies documented in the 1980-81 searches. In the course of investigating the prior documented anomalies, the team finally discovers the snorkel box for the Hunley. And this is confirmed on May 7th, 1995, when the team videotapes the snorkel box. So that is a video capture from the 1995 video footage. That's actually in the HL Hunley Recovery Operations Report. And God bless them that they're able to look at that and see a snorkel box. I don't see it personally, but so assessment of the Hunley and Housatonic sites. In May 1996, the National Park Service's Submerged Resources Center, the SRC, the Naval Historical Center, the NHC, and by the way, that today is the Naval History and Heritage Command, and the SCIA, they conducted a site assessment of the USS Housatonic HL Hunley engagement site. And by the summer of 1999, archaeologists from these groups and the U.S. Geological Survey, they conduct a limited investigation of the buried remains of the Housatonic. So part of this work that they're doing from 1996 to 1999 is to get an understanding of the composition of the seafloor in anticipation of having to excavate down and recover the Hunley. And something new that they introduced, this is in addition to the magnetometers, which they're still using, and the side scanning sonar. They use something called a sub-bottom profiler system. And kind of hard to see on the screen. This is one of those spots where you may want to listen to me and then like stop so you can just look at the slide. But basically, you have this catamaran with this sound producing device that's trailing a boat. It's sending sound wave impulses towards the bottom. And then the sound is being reflected to various degrees depending on the type of material it's hitting. That reflected sound energy is then being captured by a hydrophone, which is being streamed behind the surface vessel. So while they're doing this work, there are some emergent issues. And the issues were like this. Originally, the Hunley was built as a privateer vessel in support of the Confederacy. So who owns it? If there are human remains on board, how should they be treated? Should the submarine be left at sea as a war grave? And how will she be protected from looters now that her location is known? So ultimately, these issues are discussed, and it is decided to raise and recover the Hunley with the object of preserving it. To leave the Hunley in the area that it was at the depth that it was to its relationship with the shore, it just would have been much too easy of a target for shipwreck looters. The issue of jurisdiction over the Hunley was resolved through a programmatic agreement, PA, signed in August 1996. The PA stipulated the roles of the principal state and federal agencies involved in the Hunley recovery and provided the administrative way forward. The PA provided agreement between the consulting parties and the framework for undertaking the recovery of the Hunley, while providing the highest standard of protection under the National Historic Preservation Act. So after its discovery, there was immediate interest in recovering the Hunley, again, for various reasons, including the ones that we had just discussed. The South Carolina State Legislature creates the South Carolina Hunley Commission, which in turn creates the Friends of the Hunley. So the Friends of the Hunley, their mission, it's a nonprofit. Its mission is to procure charitable donations for the raising, restoration, and preservation of the Hunley. They were to manage and expend procured funds as needed to advance the raising, restoration, and preservation of the Hunley and related artifacts, and to perform all necessary or desirable actions incident to the above stated purposes. South Carolina State Senator Glenn McConnell was the person who recruited Warren Lash, who was a South Carolina area businessman, no experience in historic preservation or military history or submarines. But it was because of Warren Lash and his knowledge as a businessman, it was because of him that they were able to raise the money to get the Hunley salvaged and preserved. The Hunley arrives at the Warren Lash Conservation Center on August 8th, 2000. The Warren Lash Conservation Center had previously been building 225, or maybe building 255, on the old South Carolina, or excuse me, the old Charleston Naval Base. So the team was able to find an existing unused naval facility, and they were able to repurpose it for the purpose of preserving the Hunley. So this is the HL Hunley in the preservation tank at the Warren Lash Conservation Center. Obviously, for these two photos, there is no water in the tank. Usually there is. They usually drain it when they're actually doing work on the sub. Otherwise, it's submerged in fresh water at low temperature. But you can see the difference between 2000 and 2014 when they had substantially completed removal of the concretion. The concretion is like this sediment organic buildup on the hull. So today, the Hunley still sits in this preservation tank and it is submerged. The difference is today is that they've changed the nature of the liquid. This is a sodium hydroxide bath that it's in now. And there's two purposes to that. One is to maintain a higher pH in order to minimize corrosion. And then two, it's to give time to leach chloride ions out of the iron hull. They have to do this before they can move it to a final location for display. If they don't remove the chloride ions, if they would just put this thing on display, there would be serious consequences for the condition of the hull. So it sits in this preservation bath, and basically they just leave the water in. They measure the chloride concentration. When the chloride concentration stops going up, they drain the tank and they refill it again. And then they began monitoring the amount of chlorides in the water. And when that stops increasing, they're at a saturation point, so they drain the tank, fill it back up, and they repeat this process. It's 2022, and when I was there in June, I thought they had indicated that they were pretty much done with the chloride ion removal. I could be wrong though, but if they're not done with it, they're getting very close, and they're at the point that they are looking for a permanent home for the Hunley, because in the time that the Warren Lash Conservation Center was created for the purpose of preserving the Hunley, they've taken on a whole other missions, and they've actually become internationally known for their naval and nautical preservation work. So that's it for today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the briefing. If you have questions, post them below. And again, if you think that you would like to see a fourth installment where I talk about the actual preservation process, we can do that. Until then, peace out.